So welcome everyone to the second, if not third, communications SIG meeting for GSAE. I am delighted to welcome Sarah Sain, CAE. Sarah has been with Naylor for 12 years. She's currently a vice president in charge of some content, curating, researching, telling folks like us about this benchmarking survey. And most importantly, she was our editor at GSAE for Connections Magazine for years and years and years, and I still miss her. So welcome, Sarah. I'm going to let you share your screen and get us started. And if you have any questions of the participants, feel free to shout out. I see that everybody's got their name by their picture, so we're ahead on that part.
Yeah, perfect. And I will try to keep an eye in case anybody raises a hand, but if I miss that, please just interrupt me. One of the fun things about doing these for kind of small groups like this is we really can make it more of a conversation. So if you have a thought or you have a question just mid-slide, just interrupt me. I don't mind. It's fine. It keeps it going and keeps it, I think, more useful. I certainly left plenty of time at the end, but if something is on your mind, please share it. So first of all, thank you to Wendy for having me. It is always a pleasure when I get to join GSAE. I always walk away feeling like my cup is filled when I spend a little bit of time with you guys. So it's wonderful to be here. As Wendy mentioned, for anyone who I have not had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Sarah Sain. I am our VP of Content Services and one of the lead researchers on the association benchmarking report. I oversee just general leadership and development of our content and design teams today, and I help drive our content services, and we are at all times looking for how to improve our existing tools, how to bring in new tools that can help elevate the editorial and communications programs at associations. So I get to use my journalism background quite a bit doing that. And I particularly like using that to continue to be a writer and an editor for Association Advisor, which I will mention a few times. Association Advisor is the arm of our company that does all of this research work. So if I mention that, please know that's those two things kind of work in tandem together. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk through what we feel like are the main highlights from this year's benchmarking report. We're going to try to tell the story of what challenges associations are facing, how they're evolving to better engage with members, and where they can continue to find opportunities to grow and innovate into the future. I'll move through these results fairly quickly. As I said, I do want to make sure we have time at the end, but certainly we can talk as we go and make it more of a conversation. So first off, for anyone who doesn't know, we'll start with what is the benchmarking report. It is an award-winning report and analysis published every year by Naylor and Association Advisor. At this point, we have done 12 years of this survey, so we have been able to track trends over a decade plus of time with those groups who can come in and take the survey every year. It's currently 35 questions, includes everything from member engagement, technology, communications, staffing, and workplace culture. We change the survey every year based on what's happening in the market. So if there's something that needs to be asked about, we try to make sure we add it in there. We also look at, are there questions that should be sunset because they're just not things that either are top of mind or seem to be highly important to associations right now. So we do try to update the survey based on what the needs are in the community to gauge that information to be able to share it with everyone. We did just launch this in August, so this year's report is still fairly new. We're still working on getting it out there through talks like this. We do a webinar at the end of October. So some of you may actually have gotten a promo email for that today in your inbox if you see it. That will focus specifically on non-dues revenue. If you're interested in that, please sign up. And then we publish content throughout the year that dives into the results, the trends we're seeing, talks to specific individual associations about how what we're seeing in the larger data affects them on a personal level and what they've got going on in their organization. So it's something you can continue to look for updates on throughout the year. When we look at who takes or certainly has taken the survey throughout the last 12 years, thousands of association leaders have taken it over that time. We take a 4 or 5 week period each year and use those survey results during that time to build the report. This year we had 300 plus survey respondents. Included in that group, most are at a VP or higher level. So these really are the leaders of their organizations or within their teams at their associations. It's fairly evenly split between professional societies and trade associations. And certainly you can see here the top 5 industries represented. This includes about 70% of those who take it fall within one of those 5 groups. So let's dive in. Number 1, for the first time in this year's survey, and this is a question we ask every year. What is your top challenge that you are facing right now? We want to know what is keeping associations up at night so we can look at what are the barriers to that and how can we solve for that. This year, the challenge of generating non-dues revenue topped all other obstacles for the first time, with 57%, let's say close to 2/3 naming it as that top challenge that they're facing right now. It's the first time in the survey's history that it has topped that list. It has traditionally been in the top 5, but it is certainly rising above some of those others that before have been more of a priority. This year, that was followed by communicating member benefits, which was last year's top challenge, and engaging young professionals, with more than half citing those 3 in particular as really the elements that are on their mind the most. So to give a little bit of additional historical context, when you look at the top 5 challenges here in particular, the top 5 remained the same from last year. It's just the order with which we have found them and the percentages have shifted this year. So it really goes to show that while the challenges themselves are not changing significantly, which one is becoming more of a concern this year based on this climate right now, that's where we start to see those shifts. So what does concern us a bit, though, is that of all of these top 5, every one of them saw an increase in this year over last year's percentage. So on the whole, more associations are concerned with these same 5 issues, no matter where they fall in the priority list, than they were last year. In some cases, that's just a couple percentage points. In some cases, it's like 7 or 8 percentage points. So there is an increase there of varying amounts that we are aware of and certainly trying to get the word out on and trying to share solutions for. So as I said, these are the concerns when we look at what's keeping associations up at night. This is what we're focused on right now. So with that understanding that non-dues revenue is a top priority for associations, we do want to understand why that is. What is holding most associations back in this area? I don't find it really surprising that based on the information in the survey, there really are 2 that kind of are a level above the rest. And that is associations feeling understaffed and feeling like the staff they have don't have bandwidth. I think that probably is feeling familiar to what you're experiencing. And then having a limited amount of resources, whether that is not just people resources, but do you have the technology that you need? Do you have the volunteers that you need? What other resources come into play, and where are those lacking to what you feel like you need to really be as successful as possible? So when I particularly think of things like that, I think of things like the marketing team and what tools you have to be able to do promotions for the non-dues revenue that you are trying to sell, and for those where you have already sold. Do you have the availability to promote the advertising and the sponsorships that you have and are supporting your organization? So kind of in line with that, while associations on the whole have seen some improvement, particularly since the pandemic, and feeling like whether they're overstaffed, understaffed, or kind of in that, just right, happy Goldilocks medium. When we look at a department by department level, however, we start to see where there are some changes depending on what team you're talking about. So this year we saw teams like government affairs, events, education teams, those all fell into where more than not we're feeling just right with their staffing. So those teams are where on the whole they need to be for most associations in terms of staffing levels. Where teams are struggling, and this comes back to these last few slides, 55% say that they are understaffed specifically when it comes to non-dues revenue and the teams that generate that. So those teams who are focused on where the challenges are feeling more often than not like, they could bring in more support in order to be successful. 48% as well said their marketing teams are understaffed. That's where I think that's important, because even those associations that have fully staffed teams dedicated to selling, exhibit space, advertising, the teams that support that team still needs help. So they're all interconnected. And I'm speaking more where an association has these unique teams. In most cases, it's one or two people doing all of these functions. So to think that there's enough of a focus just on one of these aspects, at the end of the day, for many small staff groups, that's just not the reality. You actually are all these departments and then trying to do all these functions at the same time.
Hey, Sarah, we had a quick question out of the chat going back to those numbers. You have a sense of the historical around staffing, and that it was a bit different during COVID, but we actually really resonates with me that government affairs and events feel pretty good, and non-dues and perhaps marketing, but
we just started asking about staffing in the midst of COVID because it was so impacted so heavily across the board. First year we asked, 2020, of course, 2/3 of associations said they were understaffed right now. We know why that was, of course. That is expected. It makes sense. It was unfortunate. But teams have been doing a lot of building back since then. So to be at where only 50% overall that's an improvement from where we were a couple years ago. We know that. Last year was the first year we started asking down to a department level. And some of those teams like government affairs, education events, they saw improvement this year. So where we're hearing they're just right now, they weren't there last year and they are now. So that's a good sign that, okay, we're investing in specific teams and resources, that it's an area where we want to keep watching it year over year, because hopefully the teams who need the most support are starting to get it. And so where non-dues revenue, now that it's very clearly understood that that is a challenge, there should start to be more of an investment in that team, specifically when it comes to staffing and other resources that we'll talk to as well. So good trends in terms of hiring. We've also had very strong hiring markets over the last couple of years where people have been able to bring in really strong team members. And so that's great. And we certainly want that trend to continue. All right. So, well, many associations do seem to be at this point very honest with themselves about the fact that they do need help with certain things, whether it's certain fulfillment tasks or those non-dues revenue generating roles. Not all are necessarily taking advantage of outsourcing as an option to increase the resources that they have. If increasing staff is not necessarily one of the first things you're able to do, that can be a big investment in funds. But there are other ways to expand the capacity of the staff through strong partnerships that you can have with other organizations. A bit of good news here that we see is that the respondents who said they're outsourcing advertising sales, while 23% does not look that impressive right here. That is almost double what it was last year. So there are a number that number is going up quite a bit each year from where it has been certainly in the past. Other sources of revenue generation, though, when we talk about that and knowing, kind of keeping that at the forefront, knowing it's such a challenge, only 18% outsource career center or job postings, 12% do exhibit sales, and only 11% get help with sponsorship sales, which for most associations, non-dues revenue sponsorships specifically are a third of their entire non-dues revenue, and only 11% are outsourcing that function. They are keeping that for the most part in-house right now. So there is some opportunity to help, not necessarily have someone come in and overtake that, but maybe complement what you're already doing and add to those resources that are lacking in some areas. It certainly goes to show that there are solutions on the table that are available that associations can consider when trying to kind of break through some of those barriers. One thing that I find particularly helpful as you start to maybe consider bringing in a partner for the first time is understanding what your needs are and whether you are actually looking for a full outsourced partnership or just a vendor relationship. That distinction can be sometimes very nuanced, but it can be helpful to understand what you're really looking for. With a partnership, you can bring on an outside team that can think more strategically for you and can become more of an extension of your staff if you're looking for something at that level. Whereas if you just need very specialized help, a vendor relationship can really be much more of a clearly outlined exchange of certain services that you don't go outside of that. You know what you want, somebody can provide that for you, and it's very clearly outlined what that looks like. So there's nothing wrong in going either direction. It's really about deciding what the best fit is for your association at the moment to help get you to where generating non-dues revenue becomes less of a challenge that is keeping you up. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, when it comes to how associations are, nope, that's not right. Hold on a second. Did my slide go? There we go. Hold on a second. The slides on my end aren't working. Can you guys still see okay?
I can see number 6 with events dominate.
Okay.
The top of the engagement.
I think I'm going too fast here.
Now we're on I see number 5.
We're back on number 5. Okay.
Hybrid.
Okay, there we go. So we should be on number 5. There we go. Okay, I got it working again. Thank you for your patience. Oh, technology is fun. All right, so shifting gears a little bit. When it comes to how associations are working today, most are largely embracing flexible work. That's good. 2/3 of respondents say their staffs work in a hybrid environment. Not surprising there. I think most of you who I know on the call do exactly that. Only 11% at this point are working fully in an office 5 days a week. The interesting thing was last year, that number was closer to 20%. So more have they went back full-time in person and then have taken a step back and have maybe listened to their staffs more around what the needs are of their employees. And kind of backstepped on that a bit. So it appears that more workers certainly do prefer the hybrid option, or at least some flexibility within a schedule, depending on what that is for your organization. What we haven't done, but are looking at doing next year, just as a preview, is looking at what that hybrid environment starts to look like. If so many organizations are doing it, we want to start to get a sense of what does hybrid mean to you? Does that mean 2 days a week, 3 days a week? 1 week on, 1 week off? We want to start to get a sense now that that is more of the norm for groups. What does that norm look like? So that's something to kind of take just as a sneak peek of what may come next year. So, but another benefit of going this hybrid approach is also that, you know, it allows for hiring the right person for the right role, no matter where they're based. You no longer have to have everyone located in the same city or state necessarily, depending on your organization. You can really hire for the need that you have, not necessarily be narrowed down to your geographic area, particularly if you're located in your home headquarters is located in a smaller city. That really opens up the base of who you could have for a candidate. So that's a huge benefit. Going the hybrid approach also has allowed for many organizations to, if not completely get away from having a dedicated office space, certainly being able to downsize what you need based on that flexible work environment. So that has also led to some savings in terms of, you know, budget dollars that can be reallocated in some way towards more strategic goals.
So Sarah, going just one question on, you mentioned the increase or the decrease, sorry, of folks that were working full-time in the office all the time. Yeah. Did you notice an increase in the fully remote? Did that also go up or did the hybrid seem to
they shifted to hybrid. Yeah. So we didn't see them going from all in office to all at home. There was a little bit of increase there, but for the most part, that group shifted to a hybrid work environment. So they kind of found that middle ground of what works for them. So that's good to see. I know that's how we work as a company, and it works really well. So once you find that balance that's right for your organization of how much you need to be present in an office versus how much you can work from home, and maybe even what that day-to-day looks like, and you have the tools in place to do it, it can be really beneficial in a number of ways. So another element that we measure each year, this is one of our standing questions, is we look at a variety of engagement channels and we ask on a value scale, you know, from extremely valuable to not valuable, where do these various channels land? And when I say a variety of channels, I mean, we rank up to 50, I think at this point, different ways to engage with members, all kinds of events, print options, digital media, social media. If it's something that an association utilizes, we want to see how valuable it is and how that value shifts from year to year. Not surprisingly, an overwhelming majority, close to 92%, they find traditional conferences, trade shows, face-to-face events very or extremely valuable. So on that strong end of the value scale. So it was by far the top member engagement platform of 2023. The interesting thing was that stayed there all through the pandemic. Traditional events was at the top. Even when people were not able to have them, that value really stayed strong. And so that told us that once everything was, you know, back to whatever normal is defined in your world, that events were going to come back strong. We knew that value has remained there the entire time. So that didn't even slip. It's actually continued to go up. I think at its lowest point, it was maybe at 80%, but overwhelming majority of associations do find those face-to-face events really valuable. That's the feedback they get from their members. So not surprising that has just shot right back up to far and away being the top channel. All of these 10 channels listed here were deemed very or extremely valuable by more than half of associations. So even some of these, you know, specific dedicated event types, LinkedIn, all of that. I think even more of a highlight, every one of these top 10 increased in value year over year. So we really are seeing the top channels rise to the top even higher than they have been in the past versus some of the others at the bottom of the list. We really are seeing a lot of associations be more comfortable with understanding this doesn't bring value to us. We're going to start to sunset some of these tools. So that's been very interesting to see, being much more comfortable with some of those decisions. The ones on this list that saw the biggest increase year over year, association websites and having a strong dedicated website for your organization, and LinkedIn. which is a bit of an outlier, which I'll get into when we talk about social media later. LinkedIn had a really big increase year over year in value. So that's, let's just say, not the way that most social media has gone. So I talked about traditional events remaining strong. When asked, how does your association intend on hosting events in 2023? Most are still trying to find a really strong balance between live and virtual events like this one today, and creating a strategy that offers both depending on the event type, the audience, what the function of that event is, and coming up with a strategy that really meets everyone's needs and balances that. Hybrid event strategy is still very much overall events ecosystem. It's a big part of that. However, what we see decreasing is that virtual only events specifically is really, most associations are moving to having some live event again. It is very rare that most are just saying, you know what, we're not doing that anymore. We're all virtual. That's such a small percentage these days. It's almost down to nothing at this point. And it saw the biggest decrease this year. So everyone is getting back to in-person at this point. When we do look at the individual events that are offered in a hybrid format, in terms of a traditional conference with a live and a hybrid element, the hybrid element overwhelmingly is the educational component, whether it's streaming services, streaming keynotes or breakout sessions in a live format, or offering them as a recording after the fact. That's increasing. Very few are trying to do, you know, virtual trade shows, virtual exhibit halls. That's a very small 15% at this point. So they've really focused on where hybrid and virtual can be strongest, versus where it's still a challenge and the technology just doesn't meet the need to this day. So each year, around 2016, we started doing this. We started gauging kind of overall how often do you communicate with your members. This year, it's the lowest it's been in a number of years, 29 times a month. That actually doesn't sound that low, even though it's the lowest it's been. It still averages out to nearly once a day in some capacity. Associations are either actively communicating through things like email or a print piece or some other digital component, or more passively through things like social media posts, or where they're communicating in that way as well. The last couple of years specifically, as we've started to see these subtle declines, there really does seem to be more of a focus on the quality of the communication rather than just hitting them with a constant stream of communications through a variety of channels. So that's really been anecdotally where we think that overall decrease has come from. Here's where there is a bit of a conundrum, I guess, about the overall value has been on the decline for social media, yet you'll see the frequency with which it is used is up. So those two things don't necessarily vibe in a way that you think they would. Social media is still used very frequently. I mean, nearly half of the days every month, there is a social media post, even though the overall value of it really is not strong. Associations still seem a little uncertain, which I get, personally, I get, you know, where's the value? You're not guaranteed to meet all your members if they're not following you. Some are in some channels, some are not. This is where, LinkedIn was that outlier in that it really is strong as a channel. That is certainly what we hear individually from associations. They have a very strong LinkedIn presence. All other social media channels really declined in value, some quite significantly. Facebook and Twitter saw the biggest drops in value year over year. So, we are just hearing from more groups that's just not where their audience is anymore. Or even if their audience is there, it's not their expectation to hear from their association in those platforms. They're using them for other purposes. So they're not while they have a presence, they're not prioritizing it over other efforts that they're making. So providing a customized experience for member subgroups. This is something we measure every year and we feel like is becoming a much bigger part of a conversation, although it certainly continues to be a challenge. Almost half of the association surveyed, when asked about what barriers stood in the way to being able to have a higher member engagement with their associations, they pointed to the fact that, and then this is in quotes, we don't target or segment our communications as we should. So everyone is getting the same message, whether it's actually personalized or targeted to their needs at any given time. New members by far are the group that is communicated with in some kind of targeted way. And then it just kind of declines from there, with some of the lifetime veteran members really getting very few communications that are specific to their needs at their point in their career. What we find is that even fewer members are receiving customized messaging and communications that are based on factors outside of these main categories, whether it's your membership or your career status. This is another just kind of anecdotal in relation to the benchmarking. I know I've had a lot more conversations recently with people looking at, well, how can we go to the next level and personalize our content or target our content based on behavioral categories instead? Things like groups who have attended the same event, groups who have purchased the same white paper or research paper, groups who read the same types of emails. How do we start to look at how to personalize based on those versus just assuming that someone who all new members are the same? So we're going to send them the, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the messaging and what you're trying to provide with that content specifically. Where this becomes a challenge though for groups is that, and this is back to the benchmarking and our results, more than a third said that they have an inability to collect or use member data effectively. So any customization on any level becomes very difficult if you don't have strong data that you're able to utilize to provide that experience. So in number 10, and the last highlight today, so we've made it towards the end. So while those next generation members who often fall into that new member category or young professionals, they do receive more customization than other member groups. Most associations are still telling us that they're struggling with how to really engage with those members and bring them in to become longstanding members of their organization. That's still an area that's a challenge. Volunteer opportunities and events specifically, though, for this cohort, they are increasing. So in fact, most of the items on this list, particularly the ones at the top, they did increase year over year in terms of what is being offered for young members. So most are making sure that those offerings are on the table and are available for when those members are ready to take advantage of these things. There's certainly a recognition that, associations know they need to prioritize engaging the future of their organizations. They know they need to communicate better about, particularly in those industries that are having workforce shortages, of what they offer in terms of continuing education, abilities to connect. Most new jobs still come out of connections in the industry. That's what associations provide. So they know they can be a really critical, play a really critical role for young professionals in helping them advance in the industry. It's just the realization of a lot of those efforts is still slower to come to being than many would like at this point. So it remains something that is a challenge for most groups. Okay, so thank you again for those of you who are here. If you didn't get enough of me throwing statistics and data your way, there is an invite in the, or there's a link in the invite that Wendy sent that includes a link to the full benchmarking report. So if you would like to download it and really dive deep into some data, I would encourage you to do that if that's your thing. As I mentioned in the beginning, Association Advisor publishes content around a lot of this information year round, and we do have that webinar that's going to take place on October 25th. If you have trouble finding any of that information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to send it your way. But otherwise, with all that wrapped up, are there any questions, comments, general points of discussion that anybody would like to share?
So Sarah, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording at this point so that everyone can ask their free questions.